Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mary Todd Show. I am so glad to have my co host, Tony Sword, back with me. Um, when she wasn't here, I realized we are so much better together.
So much better.
So glad to have you back, and you're looking fabulous and doing well.
Thank you. I feel
So,
better.
yes. And every day when we get together, we always say, "Well, what kind of scripture did you read this morning, or what is it that God showed you?" And it always has to do with body, mind, and soul, because we are a triune being, just like God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And we have three parts to us. And so today we were talking about really not doing our will, but God's will be done. And that's where the real joy comes in. A lot of people think, oh, God's will's troublesome and a burden, and it's not true.
No, and he says his burden is light.
Yeah. Yep. And
So
his
much
yoke
better.
is easy.
That's right.
So today we have a ton of really great news coming from what our president has done. We went over it on our show on Monday, where we really listed he is a man of action, and we are so thrilled. But we also have some bad news. And so, Tony, I'm going to have you start to talk about Carolyn Levitt and just how amazing that young woman is.
Oh my goodness. I enjoyed watching her yesterday. This is a young gal who, 27 years old, so accomplished.
Tell them what she does.
Oh my goodness. Well, she's the press secretary, and she is. As I watched her, I was looking for the big notebook like Kelly McEnany carried, Kellyanne. Oh, I didn't see that, but I did see so much of Kellyanne. Well, come to find out, she was her assistant as a press secretary when Kellyanne was this press secretary for Trump. But yesterday, she came out and she actually, no nonsense, 27 years old, and she began to tell these individuals, I've already answered that question. I've answered that question 4 times. Go back to your notes that I've given you. There's a press release, it's in the press release, and she would not let them take control of her press conference. And she just went right on down the list of different things that President Trump had done. It was absolutely stunning to
And she
watch
was
her.
articulate and telling the truth
Oh my goodness, yeah, yeah. She
and
she
beautiful.
she not only was, I mean, she had facts. She wasn't vague. She wasn't saying, "Well, the president doesn't know." She said, "I just left the Oval Office. We talked about this," and when they asked her a question, she had an answer. Everything was well thought out and well discussed. And I was so excited to see that we have a press secretary again who will actually answer questions and not beat around the bush or let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to it.
Corinne
Like,
Jean Pierre is the
yeah,
one. Let's put a pin in that. We'll come back. Or I already answered that question. No,
yeah,
you did not.
yeah.
Any other things that you want to say about her? She sounds amazing.
Well, she really is. I got a kick out of what she was doing because I thought 27 years old, how does she have the poise? Well, this young woman worked for Fox News as a I believe it was a summer job, but nonetheless, she was there. She was around some quality individuals. She ran for the House of Representatives in New Hampshire, won the Republican seat, and then lost against a Democrat. So she did, but she's done some stuff. And then of course she was a spokesperson for MAGA, but she is an up and comer. I think we're going to see a lot more of this gal, maybe on Fox, maybe in the Senate, or maybe in the House. But she was incredible watching her navigate all these individuals. And at one point they said to her, well, what about the individuals that are going to be arrested that aren't criminals? And she said, if they've come into the United States illegally, they're a criminal. End of story. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that was decisive.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So before I introduce our wonderful guest today that we're really looking forward to meeting, Casey Whalen is his name. I'll give him a good introduction when we're ready. But the bad news is, and this is where my heartbeat is, I've had two shows about January 6th hostages. I was a J6er myself. I did not get arrested, but I have a heart for them. On Monday, a J6er, Matthew Hutton, was murdered.
Yeah.
And our producer has a video just to show you what went on.
Hey guys, Jeremy Harrell, LFA TV. We do have an update on the January 6th hostage that had previously done time and then pardoned ultimately by President Trump on January 20th. Matthew Huddle, who was shot and killed. by deputy police in Jasper County, Indiana. I told you that in order to be 100% sure of what happened, and in order to, not have this assumption that this gentleman was targeted for a reason, we needed the body cam footage. Now, in every instance where a black man or a black woman dies at the hand of a white police officer, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, BLM, Antifa, and everybody shows up and demands the footage, the body cam footage. And I can count numerous times where that body cam footage was released immediately in order to start the news narrative. Well, the police officer there, the sheriff there, Sheriff Williamson, received a Freedom of Information Act request by numerous people, numerous organizations, including the Gateway Pundit, and has refused to release that body cam footage, and says that any and all police camera footage, whether it be body or car footage, will be released after the investigation is done, and that no information will be released and no video will be released before the investigation itself is done. But releasing the video is something that multiple police agencies have done when they're in a different scenario, different situation. So I don't see why that would in any way harm the integrity of the investigation. You're not allowing any external forces inside your internal investigation. You're putting it out, truth and transparency to the American people, the taxpayer that pay you to protect and serve. And if this investigation ever ends, which they'll probably have it go on for years until you forget about it, I doubt that you're going to get the unedited or any blacked out version of the body cam footage or the police camera footage, the car footage. So this seems like a cheap attempt to keep the truth away from the American people about what happened to Matthew Huddle, former January 6th hostage on that day. Was he gunned down? Did they shoot him wrongfully? You're only leaving these assumptions to get more and more crazy and radical if you do not release the body cam footage. So this is the update. Jasper County Sheriff has said we will not release the body cam footage until we are done our internal investigation. I doubt it'll even be then. Share the video. I doubt it'll even be then. Share the video.
Makes me sick.
So
sad.
You wonder what Matthew Huddle knew. And after what our family has been through with the death and murder of my son, they'll kill if you know too much. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very suspicious about what has happened here. Let's not forget the name Matthew Huddle. Let's remember that name and keep their feet to the fire on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, Tony, we have a great guest today. He's a firecracker. He is one that really is a fighter. He's not afraid to speak the truth. I'm very excited to meet Casey Whalen. He is an investigative reporter, and he's the founder of North Idaho Exposed, which has like 14,000 viewers. And Whalen has been instrumental in exposing numerous Marxist organizations in the North Idaho and Montana. Mm-hmm. So he's meaningful to us here in Montana. Right. And he's a hard-hitting, fearless reporter, has earned the respect of his colleagues and striking the fear in the hearts of Marxists all over the great Northwest. Will you please welcome our guest, Casey Whalen? Hi, Casey.
Hi, Casey.
Hi, let me unmute myself. Hello, okay, I was unmuted, sorry. Thank you so much for having me, ladies. I appreciate it. I love your set. It looks great. You sound good.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jim, can we get Casey's picture in front of us here so we can? Absolutely. We would love to see you in our.
So, Casey, how was your rally last night with Richard Gage?
Oh, yeah, at Old State Saloon. Yeah, oldstatesaloon.com. We had Richard Gage come in, presented his website is richardgage911.org, and he gave a very thorough presentation on 9/11. A lot of things I didn't even know about. I encourage people to go watch that live stream at Old State Saloon on X and on Rumble. Very thorough, and you will definitely learn something. It's just unbelievable Richard and his wife Gail put a lot of work into this. They spend a lot of time doing this day in, day out, and this is what they do. And I'm sure you probably know of Richard Gage. Is really
Yeah.
really top notch guy, just out there, just
Oh, I'm looking
slinging
forward
the
to
truth.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
we're here to talk to you today
That's
and
right.
about what you do, but we would love to ask some questions a little later about Richard and the whole, you know, the 3 buildings that came down on 9/11 that we know about. But Casey, tell us about your fight right now and how you got started with fighting against Marxism, and just tell us about you.
Sure, thank you so much. I appreciate the platform. It's an honor to be on your show here.
Thank you.
I love the production value. It's great. You guys sound, you just know what you're doing here. It looks professional.
We have a
And
great
so
producer.
That's right.
that's for sure. You definitely do. Well, I started out as an activist back in, I would say, probably 2017. I was really frustrated. I wanted to do something. I wasn't really an activist per se, but I just seen enough as far as law enforcement. My concern was that they weren't following the Constitution.
Oh, that's a
So
shocker.
yeah, I know. So as a litmus test, what I did is I got 120 full-size constitutions from the Secretary of State of Idaho, and then I would take those, take a stack at a time, and I would take them into the police departments and the sheriff's departments while filming, and that's something called a First Amendment audit. So I was kind of like making sure they were respecting my rights, and then I was taking constitutions to them to see how that would go.
Were you by
Um,
yourself filming, or did you have a film crew with you, or how did that work?
so I had nobody basically. I just did it by myself. I just had to. It was really hard at first. It takes a lot of it does take a lot of courage to go and
Yes.
film the police. And so First Amendment auditing was really popular at the time. I'm sure it still is. I don't really follow that too much anymore. But for a while, I would take the constitutions in. And the first time I did this, I went to the Coeur d'Alene Police Department, was filming, and 6 cops came out, surrounded me after I took in these constitutions inside the police department. I was filming outside the building, just constitutionally protected activity. And in Idaho, under the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 9 is freedom of speech. And of course, in Montana, there's a like law, and that says freedom of speech. All persons may speak, write, and publish on all subjects, being responsible for the abuse of that liberty. And so I would just kind of use that as my guide. And uh, long story short, without taking up a lot of time, I did that for a while. Started doing public records requests
Well,
for
let me ask
myself.
you this first. What did the police officers, how did they respond to you? Did were they afraid? Were they wondering,
They
try to
they
get
just
rid
didn't
of
know
you?
what I was doing. They were
Yeah.
trying to figure out what I was doing. They were ultimately, I did. That's right. I left the police department on foot, went to a nearby store. An officer actually followed me to that store, and he drove by and called me a tyrant, or he called me something like a jackboot thug or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't record it, but I was just like, that's so that was my first encounter with the police, trying to see how this litmus test would go. So that turned into doing public records requests. And so what I found out was that my name was being disseminated through the police department. They had these internal flyers, and they would say, just for your information, he's not wanted for anything, but he's going to the police departments, the sheriff's departments, public buildings, filming and handing out constitutions. And it was really just like, what country are we in, right?
Right.
How awful of you to take the
Yeah.
Constitution.
But the really scary thing is that this internal flyer, for which they weren't supposed to give me, but they accidentally did twice, and I think it could have been done on purpose so we could find out what's going on. Is that this information was being created by an intelligence analyst in the police department, and then they are working with other intelligence analysts in the state of Idaho and even in Washington through the fusion centers. And so that's really that's how I got interested in the fusion center topic, which is a whole other topic in itself. But being aware of that, I would go into these public places, and then I would just do record requests on myself, and I would find out all kinds of information. And then now I've done thousands and thousands of records requests, and it's extremely invaluable. I encourage people to do public records requests. That's something we can talk about another time. But and then it just sort of transitioned from becoming an activist into becoming an independent journalist. So I did that for a couple of years, and then in 2019, it would have been June 15th, 2020. Yeah, 2019, sorry. So June 15th, 2019, at the Spokane Library, South Hill Library, there was a drag queen story hour.
Oh.
And so I just wanted to go there and film it. And didn't really have I wasn't really in favor of it, of course, but I just wanted to go there and try to film it and show people what was going on. And then try to go into the room where the story hour was happening and then show people what's happening there. Well, long story short, there was yellow tape cordoning off the entire library grounds, and the police officers were asking people which side are they on.
No.
And if they were not, and if they were not in favor of the drag queen story hour, they were forced to go across the street. So, for instance, they even kicked my friend Bill Jasper, who's the senior editor of the New American Magazine. He was there, and they kicked him across the street. And he's the senior editor of the New American Magazine, so he legitimately had a reason to be there. So I got kicked across the street. Right. And I got kicked across the street. And I had this long 20-minute conversation with this really nice sergeant. I was pretty mad, and I cited the Washington State freedom of speech. The Washington State Constitution freedom of speech. I think it's Article 1, Section 12. I can't quite remember. But it's similar language as in Idaho. And after telling him about this, that you're infringing on my rights, they actually let me go back across the street. And I was the only person allowed to do that.
Wow. So you got to film it?
Yeah. So that was very powerful. And they wouldn't let me in the room. They said no pictures beyond this point. I even took a picture of a reporter in the room taking a picture. So the absolute hypocrisy, trying to completely control the narrative. And as insult to injury, someone who later became a friend of mine, Pastor Ashton Yackton, he was arrested for just trying to go in the library. And so I got all the body camera footage by doing records requests, about 30 hours of body camera footage, which took a while to get. And it just really painted this sad picture of the state of affairs in our country.
So at this point, we know that COVID-19 had already been going. Were you wearing masks and all that? It hadn't
Not
started
yet. That was
yet.
2019.
Oh, 19. I was thinking 2020. Okay.
Yeah, so that hadn't even happened yet. And so it was just a really sad example of state of affairs in our country. And so at that point, I really did transition into becoming a warrior in the cultural war.
So they had already stopped your freedom of press, freedom of speech. They wouldn't allow you to go in, but they allowed other media to go in. Was it a major newspaper that was in there?
Yeah, probably the Spokesman Review.
Yeah,
I can't quite remember who, but
yeah,
maybe the Inlander. I'm not quite sure, but it's the absolute hypocrisy. So from then, I just transitioned into really focusing on the cultural war we're in right now.
Mm-hmm. And this was all before the whole DEI, or was that in the middle of DEI transgender movement?
I can't quite remember, to be honest, at that time.
Yeah,
not sure. But obviously it was in full swing. You had the drag queen story hour at the library. Since then, we've had in Coeur d'Alene, really have a group of people that are implementing this in Kootenai County. And so I've just started researching these different groups, which I can talk more about in detail, which ultimately really led me to Montana.
Well, tell us about that. How did you get led to Montana?
So I researched these groups, these Marxist groups in Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County. It's called the Kootenai County Task Force. I'm sorry. Yeah, Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. Sorry, there's all these acronyms and it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
So the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations has ties with people in Montana who are part of the Montana Human Rights Network. And so by monitoring these groups, I was able to find out when they would have an event. A lot of times they're meeting together, and I think over the years they become more emboldened. Where in the past they'd be more secretive about a lot of this, but now as we've come full circle to where we are today, they're right out in your face telling you what they're doing, and they just don't care because they have law enforcement behind them helping them. So
and the press.
And the press, yeah, exactly. So I guess I just started researching these groups and really started researching the Montana Human Rights Network too. And the Montana Human Rights Network, I can kind of give you this this little information here as to what they do.
Okay.
The purpose of the Montana Human Rights Network, according to their 2019 IRS 990 form, is to organize Montana residents to realize their power to create pluralism, justice, and equity in their communities. We challenge bigotry and discrimination, support marginalized people, and advocate for legislation that honor everyone's basic
Boy, are those
rights.
buzzwords.
Yeah, that's DEI all over.
Yeah. So this was created in 1991 by Christine Kaufman and Ken Toole, who later go on to become Montana state legislators.
Yes, yes.
And that's a common thread I'm sure you're probably aware of. You'll see with the Montana Human Rights Network, which has now been rebranded to Catalyst Montana. You'll see a lot of lawyers in these groups. You'll see a lot of legislators in these groups, trying to force society into their ideology.
Do you see them on both sides, Republican and Democrat?
As far as what?
The Marxist idealism?
Legislators.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I guess you have rhinos, of course. So that's
that's why
really
I was asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically the rhinos, of course, are that camp too.
So that's part of our goal is to expose the rhinos. Jim's given us a note.
He said, to ask about Love Lives Here.
Yeah, so I do believe that Love Lives Here was created by a lady named Sherilyn DeVries in the Kalispell area. And then basically what happened is that program, it's just a way to get the community to, fight back against hate. And it's a way for them to kind of come together to be effective against what they consider as hate. And so that type of organization that Love Lives Here has been created in Coeur d'Alene. And then I'm sure it's been mirrored other places.
Whitefish, it's huge.
So they have Whitefish, yeah. So they have a lot of they have a lot of these little campaigns that they create just to really confuse people and muddy the waters. And then they change the names and they do all these things. But at the end of the day, you have like the Montana Human Rights Network. There's a group in Portland, Oregon called the Western States Center, and they create mentors in communities to perpetuate the ideology. So a lot of these groups have a different flair to them, but ultimately at the end of the day, they're all working together, as I'm sure you're aware of. And there's other groups, of course, the Southern Poverty Law Center. There's one called the IREHR, which you need to familiarize yourself with. And the IREHR stands for the Institute for Research Education on Human Rights. And it was started in 1983 by a man named Leonard Zeskind, who is a communist. And I won't go into all of that today, but essentially his work through the IREHR and their articles that they're currently creating are being fed, of course, to the FBI and law enforcement as actual true information. And a lot of times it's not completely true. And it's done in a way to slander people, defame. It's basically what it's called is ritual defamation.
Yeah.
So these groups are working together behind the scenes to muddy their opponents.
And are they all connected with Love Lives Here as well?
No. I mean, Love Lives Here is just a program that's part of the Montana Human Rights Network.
Okay.
And in Coeur d'Alene, the Kootenai County, we have a local human rights education institute, and so they're basically partnered with the Love Lives Here campaign in Coeur d'Alene. So they just reinforce these smaller organizations within larger organizations. Of course, many of them are 501c3s. They're getting grant money. And a lot of this has to do with grant money. For instance, in 2022, in June, I'm sure you'll remember that the 31 members of Patriot Front were arrested in Coeur d'Alene. And a lot of the people that were behind that arrest have connections to the Human Rights Education Institute and the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. This event in June was called the Pride in the Park event, where we had a drag queen dance party. You may have heard that a blogger, my friend Summer Bushnell, was basically charged with, sued for defamation, and she lost in the amount of $1.1 million, I believe, against Eric Posey, who was a drag performer at that event with kids present. It looked like he had possibly exposed himself. So Summer was saying that he exposed himself. There was a video that was blurred. And ultimately, she did not win. She lost, unfortunately. So, that's a major aspect of
Did
this.
it go to the Supreme Court in Idaho?
I think she tried to appeal it at the district level, and I think it was rejected. So,
well, so then
I don't know.
It begs the question: if we are seeing this, the disparity of her lawsuit or someone coming against her, are we seeing that Marxist ideology also then in our police forces as well as with the judges?
Uh-oh. I think he's frozen.
I think we lost him.
It's interesting with the Love Lives Here until we get our guest back, Casey. We live in a beautiful neighborhood here in downtown Kalispell, right in downtown, and there's several houses that have Love Lives Here signs on their windows.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, and Whitefish is just packed with it. But I really didn't know what love, it sounds so good. Love lives here. Oh, I want to have love living at my house. So I was very interested in the connection between all those and what I've seen here and how it's all intertwined. It's all Marxism. Yeah. It's all socialism. It's all the same stuff, kids getting transgender surgeries and all this crazy stuff.
Well, and they talk about it being the freedom, being able to know hate. But the problem is they're hating and they're not allowing people like you or me to stand up for those poor kids who are being subjected to a drag queen in there or being subjected to exposure of a man. That is beyond the scope of why we would have a drag queen come in at a picnic or a parade and do something with children. That is right up there with child pornography.
Well, and they're trying to normalize it so kids will grow up thinking this is normal and this is what I should be looking at. I did hear good news about our President Trump, who said there will be no transgender surgeries until you become an adult, 18. And so he's protecting our children from this. And really what they're trying to do is destroy our future generation and dummy us down.
And the poor kids are so confused anyway. When I went through puberty, what was that, a couple of years ago? Oh, you keep it down over there, Jim.
Casey's rebooting and he'll be back.
Okay. Right. But I remember I was a tomboy and I wanted a football helmet and football for my birthday. Yeah. Had you asked me back then, do you want to be a boy? I'd have probably said, yes, I wished I was a boy because being a girl sucks. I don't get to do all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But if in today's language, well, I would have probably been one of those kids that would have been pushed toward transitioning.
Well, especially when you get rewarded for doing it. Yes. And everybody, you're so wonderful and you're a hero, and there's schools that applaud. And even for the parents, it's just unbelievable what's happened.
Well, and then look at what happens to the poor kid that has transitioned. We've seen one testimony after another talking about how horrible their lives are once they have transitioned. And many of them are suicidal. They're not happy. It's just not. They should never have allowed our doctors to mutilate these poor children.
Right. But it is being done by design.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to it, and the whole Marxism thing that is invading every part of our life. Hollywood, our universities, our schools,
all the way down the line. When we talked about on the campaign, how we saw the Buddhism coming into the Buddhist centers, into the colleges, and nearly every major college had them.
You mean Confucius University?
Confucius, yes,
I was going to say, I didn't remember that.
It's Confucius.
Confucius University. It's China. What they do is they give a lot of money to the university, a lot of money, and then they set up these Confucius universities within or institutes within the university, and they take the brightest minds. There are engineers. My son was one of them. And they use our country, to steal our technology, and to take our brightest people. And so
and it wasn't just the top universities, Ivy League schools, the USCs of the school district. We were seeing it all the way down into state schools, land grant schools, University of Montana State University. They had those centers. So,
oh, goody. Casey's back with us. Hi, Casey. We were just talking about Marxism taking over our colleges, our universities, our Hollywood, everything. But my personal interest mainly is, I know you promoted Trevor Loudon's COVID video, the COVID-19 tool of Red China and the socio-globalist left. And I tried to look it up. It had been taken off on YouTube. Tell us about that and how you got involved with the whole COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm just a video. I'm partially a videographer, so I filmed a lot of events, like the Red Pill Expo. I filmed a live stream of that. All kinds of, I film everything, and so that was just another gig. And I've got to interview Trevor twice. Actually, the reason that video is not on YouTube is because my last video on YouTube is with Trevor Loudon, and guess where we are?
New Zealand.
We're out in front of the Human Rights Education Institute in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, talking about the rotten Marxists in Coeur d'Alene. Oh. That was my last video.
My goodness.
And then they yanked my channel. So I had almost 20,000 subscribers, which I don't, whatever, it doesn't matter. And so I had to I'm on Rumble, North Idaho Exposed. It's mostly all backed up there. But if you want to see all of my content from when I first started, that's all on Odyssey at North Idaho Exposed. And so I've had to, with the censorship, you have to kind of deal with things at times and find new platforms. And so right now I'm on Rumble, North Idaho Exposed, on X, Casey_Whalen, that's WHALEN, and on Substack, CaseyWhalen.substack.com. And so if I could just
we'll
really
have
quickly,
Jim put that at the bottom of our show so people can get that if you didn't get a chance to write it down.
Okay, and so what's really interesting is that about that event I was trying to tell you about in Coeur d'Alene in June of 2022, where the 31 members of Patriot Front were arrested. By doing records requests from that event, I found out that the North Idaho Pride Alliance, who put on the drag queen dance party and the Pride in the Park event, all part of the Human Rights Education Institute, part of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. They're all in the same mix. By doing records requests through the police department, I found out that on June 7th, days prior, the director of the, so there's all these organizations. The director of the North Idaho Pride Alliance contacts the police department and the director of the Human Rights Education Institute and asks that they contact the FBI because there's going to be a Catholic rosary walk at an adjacent park on that day. And the director of the Human Rights Education Institute replies back, sent to the FBI. So they reported
very cahoots then together.
Absolutely. And so I also get additional information, which is on my Substack. You can find one of the articles that has a picture of them doing the Catholic Rosary Walk. They're praying. I get an internal flyer like the one I mentioned earlier from the police department, and it's talking about the Catholic Rosary Walk and how it could be a danger to the Pride in the Park event. And so they're proactively, it's like modern day Minority Report, really. So that was very disgusting to see that. And then these emails, there's communications with the FBI. There's an Idaho State Patrol officer, Michelle Beach. She's gay. She was at a Pride in the Park event a year prior with a rainbow sash on with her ISP, Idaho State Patrol officer outfit on. The ISP has a Human Rights Consortium steering committee with the Human Rights Education Institute. So they're very tied at the hip, which this should not be happening at all, but it is.
Our Montana Governor Greg Gianforte flew a gay flag in our state capitol for 2 years running now. And I wrote him, we actually campaigned for him when he ran for Congress, and I wrote him and said, what's going on, Greg? Why are you doing this? And I never heard back.
I think his son is
Shame.
transgender, I believe. Greg Gianforte's son is in that other movement on the other side.
That, you know what? That is his business and his choice.
Mm-hmm.
But to fly the rainbow flag in our capital is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What his son does is his business. But they're not flying, they're not flying huge crosses. I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see
the Christian flag.
Yeah, and of course, all
they
the
wouldn't
scripture.
like that, though.
No. And it's not popular.
That's why we have to do it.
But the fact that he wouldn't write me back, and we've had him to our home. We've gone out to dinner with the Gianfortes, and he wouldn't address it.
He wouldn't budge.
No,
Yeah.
and it's so one-sided, But it's all change. It's starting to change. I feel the change in the air.
Yeah, that's for sure. And just one last thing I wanted to mention on this topic, because that event in Coeur d'Alene was so important as far as the research I have done. I found out also that one of the grants that the North Idaho Pride Alliance applied for the next year was a nonprofit security grant, and in that grant they actually cited the arrest of Patriot Front. From what I know of that case, the Patriot Front case, that was very one-sided. Those guys, they never should have been arrested in the first place. But the reason that they did do it is because it allowed their friends that have these 501c3s to apply for grants and cite the very thing that they help perpetuate. And so that's just a minute example of what's happening here. It's happening in your community, and people can find out more about it by doing public records requests. And it sounds boring and tedious, and it kind of is, but once you start doing records requests, it's unbelievable the information that you can get. Montana is not really a great state to do public records requests in, because the law is so general and so vague that these institutions just get to make up their own rules for the most part. They do have to stay within the law, but the law is just so vague that it's not like in Idaho where it's they have 3 days to reply. In Montana, that they can kind of reply from what I recall.
Choose not to.
I've had that happen where they don't reply. And the only remedy usually is a lawsuit, even in Idaho. But
we have a personal experience with this. I ran for U.S. Congress, and there were some anomalies in the votes, and we were approached and said there was I think it was 28% something off in Flathead County, and it did not favor me. And so we went to the county clerks, every single one of them, and requested that we get the voting records. And some gave them to us, but most did not. And they gave excuse after excuse. The file's too big to send. You have to send me a $25 check, which I did, and we still are waiting. And that was last June.
Well, even in some of those records that we sent, they said this is coming from the Secretary of
they send me Christine. So Jacobson's our Secretary of State.
Yeah, there was nothing. I mean, it was still the wrong data. We wanted the voting record from that particular county, and we went to every county.
We did,
and they would. Many of them wouldn't budge.
Tony was my campaign manager, so when we say we did it together with my husband Rick. Yeah, we've just been in this fight, so we know what you're talking about.
That information was not forthcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame. And I actually spoke with Senator Mark Noland about 2 months ago. I was telling him, you need to adopt what Idaho is doing. Look up the Idaho law as far as public records requests are concerned. I was just suggesting to him, you guys need to mimic this in your state. It will help a lot. A couple minor changes, and it's gonna go a long way, I think. So
how did he respond? We like Mark Nolan. He's a good guy. How did he respond?
I think he's had a lot going on. Yeah. I didn't have a lot of information to provide him at the time, but I suggest that if you can find a legislator there, just have them look at the Idaho public record request law and match it up with the Montana, and you'll see that you just incorporate some of what Idaho's doing, and it's going to make your constituents much happier.
That's good.
Well, it's a little bit more transparent. So you've got that transparency of what's going on with some of these groups that keep changing their names. Kind of hard to keep up with that when you think you've got it down for, live, love, life or whatever.
Up
And then
this year or whatever.
Love
yeah,
lives
then they
here.
change their name. That's kind of hard to keep up with.
Does it? Does it?
And
And
they
that's,
always make them sound so good.
oh,
We
sure.
want love to live here in our
Yeah.
hearts.
You like that? I mean, it sounds good, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All
You
those
like everyone love
buzzwords
love.
sound good. Yeah.
Well, I have a couple questions for you about, you were talking about that Marxism, that is infiltrating Montana. And I know this may sound like a Pollyanna naive question, but we're seeing it outside of, well, you were talking about it with the gay pride and the library, etc. Are we seeing it in our commissioners that sit on boards? Are we seeing it with our police commissioners and our police departments, deputy sheriffs?
Yeah, like I alluded to earlier, as far as with the whole DEI thing, especially with the Idaho State Police here, like I said, we had Michelle Beach, who was
Mm-hmm.
going to the Pride in the Park events with her uniform on, with a
Yeah.
rainbow sash, and you have the District 1 commander, John Kemp at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He was in favor. I tried to tell them, like, I tried to email him and say, like, look, you guys shouldn't be doing this. And he didn't, he was kind of rude about it and didn't answer my question. And he just wanted me to go away. But I would say, yeah, there are people that are obviously in favor of this ideology and they perpetuate it through the department. And I don't think that's right. As far as county commissioners, and I'm sure we have sprinklings of that all over the nation, but
Mm-hmm.
I think with Trump in office now and the move to purge DEI from the schools and public institutions, I think that gives us a great foothold now to really push back, and that is happening. A couple things we're working on. I move around a lot. I'll embed in communities, and I'll just do records requests, and from my prior knowledge, I can find a thread, and I kind of know what to look for, and it's been pretty effective. And so I just encourage people to, start doing records requests in your community. I can come back and talk about records requests some other time, maybe in more detail. But
That'd be interesting.
a lot of ways we could talk about. Like, for instance, just so people are aware, I have an article on my Substack called "A Montana Human Rights Network Attempt to Hijack Radio Station." So in the early 2000s, John Stokes ran a station called KGEZ out of Kalispell,
Yes.
also called Z600.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a shock jock. You guys are probably familiar with him, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But he was very bombastic, and he called out, the climate change people. And let's see, Earth Day in 2001, he had a effigy of a Nazi symbol painted green, and he lit it on fire. And so that caused a big uproar. He did that outside of his radio station, which is now gone. They tore it down a couple of years ago, just outside of Kalispell.
Yeah.
And so his story is sad because I looked into this after kind of catching wind of it, and I after doing research, I found out that these groups, even Christine Kaufman, the people that helped create the Montana Human Rights Network, and other people in their community proactively filed a complaint with the FCC to have this FCC license yanked in 2005. And at the same time, on the Montana Secretary of State's website, they tried to register KGEs. So if you actually go to the Montana Secretary of State's office, do a business lookup, and look for Montana Human Rights Network, you'll see in their listings from 2005, they tried to take KGEZ. There's a listing for Z600. There's a listing for one of the other names of his station. So they were trying to take it about the time he was supposed to renew that registration on the Montana Secretary of State's website. And so, long story short, about 2 years later, and the FCC ruled in John's favor because they were trying to say that he was saying all these, slanderous things about these people on his station, but they sided with John. They didn't yank his license, and then 2 years later, he was another defamation lawsuit. by his next door neighbor that owns an RV company. They sue him for defamation. He ends up losing and basically has to sell the radio station. And he passed away December 2022. He died mysteriously in his
Oh,
home.
that's a shocker.
Yep, it is a shocker, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He died in his home. Somehow his kitchen caught fire,
Somehow.
and he died. I did get the coroner's report of items found. That's all I could actually get. The sheriff wouldn't even talk to me about it. But I did get the coroner's report of items found in the kitchen, and you had like a bottle of liquor, cigarettes,
Mm-hmm.
computer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so to me it was very weird how
Mm-hmm.
he mysteriously just
Well, Casey, I don't know if you know this or not, but we had our son was a PhD in electrical engineering and happened to commit suicide with defensive wounds all over his body and the DNA evidence showing on the strap the Malaysian and Chinese DNA. He was in Singapore. So we are, since that happened in 2012, um, we are very suspicious of all of these really strange deaths.
That happen to take people out that are in the way.
That are in the way.
Yeah.
Well, our son Shane wouldn't go along with the illegal transfer of technology to China. And he quit his job and he had a ticket to come home. His bags were packed and they garroted him and hung him on a door and told us he committed suicide. But our government isn't part of that cover up. We have all the DNA evidence, all the forensic evidence, all the evidence and we have the evidence of what the technology he was working on. He was the only American that could give this to China. So we understand, and that's why this whole J6 murder on Monday really is suspicious to me. And I just think we've got to expose this evil. And I'm really happy there's people like you. But
absolutely.
You know what? I don't understand what motivates people, because we have relatives that are good people. You know, we have relatives that buy into all this Marxist stuff. And they bought into the whole COVID thing. And, you know, we practically ruined our relationship because we didn't. But what motivates? I know money and power, but they're not getting any more money and power. They just believe it. What do you say about that?
I think a lot of it is fear. And you know, it's easier it's easier. Well, how does that go? Mark Twain said, how do you put that? It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled.
Yes.
Right. So I think a lot of it's that and fear, to be quite honest. And then of course, the group collective thinking and, you know, so I actually feel sorry for these people. I mean, because they're obviously common sense takes a back seat to their ideology and their belief system, which is a shame. So I just think, you know, the Overton window has drastically shifted, right? The last, just in this last year. And so with this purging of DEI from these public institutions, like I said, now we have a foothold. One of the things that we're working on here, where I am in the Boise area right now, is the books in the libraries. And Idaho passed a law last year that allows parents to challenge the books in the children's section, if I can talk here. And so we're trying to in the Boise area, no one's really doing it. So we're basically telling people, you have this option. This is how you do it, and just provide them the tools to. And actually, since we just did this little video yesterday outside of the Meridian Library, we've already had a parent contact us saying our kids in fourth grade were given these inappropriate books, and so we're helping them right now go through the process to get those books out of the children's section. So
excellent.
I think it's exciting, and I think we just have to find out where is this DEI stuff still lingering, and we just pounce on it and cause a fuss. And let's get it out of these institutions and protect our children.
And I think we need to expose our elected officials that are voting for this stuff, especially the rhinos, the ones that say that they're conservative and constitutional and love children and yada, yada. And then you look at the way they vote. and they're supporting DEI and supporting transgender surgeries in the military and supporting all this stuff for kids to transition. And people have no clue.
No, they don't. So I mean, we just have to just keep doing what we do, right, and just keep sounding the alarm. And
that's
right.
what we're
That's
what
right.
we're here for. We our show is about mind, body, and spirit, but all of this has to do with mind, body, and spirit, because like when you talked about fear, perfect love casts out all fear. So when you're not afraid, and you obviously overcame fear to go film police officers, we have to step up and not be afraid and do the right thing. And we also need to believe the truth and not lies. And so that's our goal, is to the best of our ability. I'm sure we'll make mistakes, but tell the truth.
Getting the truth out there. And I think that's one of the things that is most frustrating, is there are so many people who are believing the lie and they don't even know that it's a lie. And being able to expose that lie and giving them the truth, giving them something else other than the lie so that they can see it. And we used to giggle about it being conspiracy, but anymore, conspiracy is just what was it last week, and now it's the truth. So we're seeing a lot of that. And so we want that exposed. We want the truth to be out there, because the truth will set us free.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as another example, as far as the institutions and universities are concerned, back in, I guess it was, I want to say, well, yeah, around the July last year, the Montana Human Rights Network tried to send a letter to Montana Tech to let them know about one of their professors there named Trennan Bayliss, who at the time was running for House District 84. And so they tried to get him fired because they were saying that this person online saying all these bad things were Trennan, when in fact none of the information they provided proved that. And so, I mean, potentially, Trennan could try to file a defamation lawsuit, but he didn't win his seat. And we had the Daily Montanan run a story based on the Montana Human Rights Network story, right? And I called out the editor of that, and of course, he never replied back. But that this is the kind of stuff that they do. They try to get, whatever they think they can get away with, they will try to do it. So luckily, the university sided with Trennan. I did records requests and found that they were supporting the professor. That there was no proof of what the Montana Human Rights Network was saying. And then what's funny is, as this is happening, the Montana Human Rights Network changes their name from that to Catalyst Montana, and I'm sure that was all planned, but just the timing was really interesting. And so Trennan was saying, what's the deal here?
Who am I
you guys
fighting?
are going to then change your name. And of course, the lady who was the interim director, her name escapes me at the moment, but she was a lawyer. She has her own law firm, and it's just like, you're a lawyer and you're trying to actually, like, he could probably charge you with defamation, and you're going to like go that far out on the limb just to get him fired so that you can brag to your friends and get more money. It's a sick ideology. And I'm glad to see that the tide is turning. I'm sure you ladies are too. And
yes,
let's go and let's get our country back, right?
Absolutely.
And it reminds me of what they've done to these J6 prisoners and refugees, because they're ruining their lives, their reputations, their businesses. And it is just a travesty when you see what Black Lives Matters did, burning down our statues, our buildings, and they got nothing. And I worry a little bit, and worry's not a word I should be using, but it's true, about AI, how they can do an AI thing where it sounds like your voice. They can even make it look like you and get you into a lot of trouble. And I think with J6, they fixed a lot of those videos to make it look like something happened that didn't happen. And I'm not saying that there wasn't some of that, but I know personally, and I was there, so I know what happened. I saw that, we saw officers ushering people in, and those are the things they want to cover up. But, we have a few minutes left. I would like you to just end with anything that you'd like to say to our audience about what you're doing, what you'd like to see, or how you'd like to end this show. We're so glad that you've been on.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I have had so many experiences over like the last 5 years. As far as COVID's concerned, I was part of a group called People's Rights in Idaho. That's a whole other topic in itself. I'd love to come back and talk about, that maybe public records requests. But I really want to encourage people to do public records requests. So it's very simple, and you'll be surprised at the information that you get back. So I'm trying to think if there's
What
something
happened?
else I
So let
want.
me ask you really quick on that, because we did a FOIA request for my son's murder, and CBS News, who did a story, we were on 48 Hours, said we were the only case they've ever not been able to get a FOIA request on. That they got it, we couldn't get one. Finally, we fought so hard, we got a 9-page paper, but most of it said denied, denied. So what do you say to that?
I guess it depends on what was the information you were looking for.
Just surrounding my son's murder and
Okay.
the whole thing in Singapore. There was an inquiry. We were there just so we asked for a FOIA request from our government, and they wouldn't
So
give it to us. And they
it
wouldn't
was
give it.
it was federal.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I haven't done a lot of federal records requests just because a lot of times it's you have to go through the bureaucracy of who is the custodian of the records. So I don't know if are you sure the people that you're requesting the information from they had?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And CBS said they've never had that happen to them. They know what they're doing. We might not have, but they knew. But anyway, I digress.
Well, I would say file a lawsuit, I guess, is really
I think that's why I asked you when you said filing a lawsuit. We did file a lawsuit to get the strap around my son's neck, and they destroyed it because they said it would be too painful for the family. And we went to court twice. Yeah. So,
oh man,
yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. But I didn't mean to end on that note. I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. You're an American hero, and
Yes.
we need people like you. And I hope that this show motivates people to get out there and do, whatever we're created to do. We're not all like, researchers or video photographers, but we can all do something, right?
That's right. Yep. Every day, just do one right thing for the country, right?
That's right.
Well,
keep pushing on. So
yep.
I really appreciate the platform. And if people are interested in my information, you can go to caseywhalen.substack.com, on X, Casey_Whalen, and on Rumble, North Idaho Exposed. And hope to talk to you ladies again soon.
Thank you so much, Casey. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Bye.